What's up, everybody? And we are doing another Ukraine-Russia update. These updates have been coming in fast, so I wanted to get this one out. It's been a couple of days since I've done one. We have got some small updates and some interesting progression from Ukraine that I want to talk about. But before we get started, question of the day comes from BT293. They say, question! What do you think about people just grabbing tanks and stuff? So, this is a byproduct of war, right? Like, people finding things, tanks, weapons, unexploded missiles. The tank thing's been quite the online, I don't know what you would say, like, viral thing, right? You've seen these civilians, like, towing tanks with tractors and stuff. So, I've got multiple kind of directions you can think about this, right? One is, it's cool to have a tank. The other one is, if you've got an enemy tank, you got to be careful because they might think that... You want to be careful that they don't think you're an enemy, right? That's another thing. Thirdly, post-war... What happens if you've got this tank and where does it go? Who takes charge of it? Who owns it? I don't know if they've already declared that. And 3, if the war is done with and you have a tank and the opposition wins, you're in bad hands, showing that you have a tank that you're not supposed to have. So there's multiple different things there that can happen. I think it's hilarious that people are just like taking this stuff, but at the same time, I would be very cautious about what you do with it. If you own it, I wouldn't put it near your house at all, because if they turn around and try and blow it up and it's right next to your house, you're in trouble. Would store it in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere. That's what I would do. Cool bit of kit to have, unnecessary. I personally would have been like, yep, nah, cool. I'm going to leave it. Not for me. But thank you for your question, BT293. If you want your question answered, leave it in the comment section down below and we will get to it. Okay, so we've got some updates. Of course, we're using the BBC. Again, I've spoke about this many times that it's the best kind of source that I've seen across the political spectrum. The news and everything's starting to slow down a bit. Or at least it is here in the West. Which I find kind of interesting. It looks like they've become quite stale with updates on a ceasefire again. Which is no surprise. I was having a talk with my friend, and I want to see what everyone thinks about this as well in the comment section. There's things like this have been happening for years. But the Ukraine one gets a lot of attention. More than what's happening in other countries where it's happening in other countries, right? So me and my friend were trying to discuss, like, why is this happening? And we came to the conclusion that Ukraine is a very Western country now, and we presume that that's the case. You have countries in the Middle East that this has happened to numerous times, and it doesn't get anywhere near the amount of coverage, nor the attention from governments to help them. And my guess is that it's because Ukraine is a mostly Western country. And what I hope happens from this is once we see this settle down and hopefully Russia backtrack and move away, I hope this is kind of like a big wake up to all these other countries that this is happening to, even if they're not a Western, like a traditional Western country, because it is happening all over the world and it needs to be addressed and it needs to be looked at. Scrutinally looked at, is that the word to say, and not have our biases just because they're a Western country or not. So if there's a culture in the Middle East that's being invaded unnecessarily, they should also get our help. Just because they're not a Western country doesn't mean they shouldn't have the help. But at the same time, what is help, right? For me personally, I see help as humanitarian supplies and sanctions on invading countries. Right? Countries that are doing the dirty. But at the same time, the West, or mostly the US, help has sometimes been go into the country and blow shit up and make it even worse. And that's not what we want. And they haven't done that with Ukraine. Again, I think it's mostly because it's a Western country. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing this in Ukraine. We need to do this, but we also need to do this across the board. That's what I'm saying. I'd love to know your opinion in the comments section down below. I do read the comments. Some of the discussions in there are fantastic. So please comment down below. Let's look at this summary. I've got this up, BBC, as always. It's the best summary I've seen of headlines across the political spectrum. So let's go over the summary, and then we're going to go over the map, which I think has some very interesting things happening. You'll see. Anyway, let's read the summary. The situation on the ground is not changing dramatically, and Ukraine could fight Russia to a standstill, Western officials tell journalists. This is pretty much the headline I'm going with today. The one that I think is the biggest kind of show and tell of this video, because there's multiple reasons that this could be the case, and I'm going to get into that in the map. But I have my suspicions that this could be a good thing or a bad thing. Okay, so we'll get into that in the map. Similarly, the Pentagon says the Russian advance is frozen around the country on multiple lines of axis. Again, this could be a good or bad thing. We're going to get into that. I think, for the most part, it's good. I'd be very surprised if what I predict about the bad thing to come true. I very much doubt that's going to be the case. But we'll get into that with the map. Civilians are said to be emerging alive from the ruins of a theatre in Mariupol that, according to Ukraine authorities, was bombed by Russia. So this is good. Civvies are surviving. Again, I've spoke about this in all my videos. My biggest thing is the humanitarian aspect. They need to be keeping people safe. They need to be keeping people fed with water, shelter, all this important stuff, and not be manipulated into enemy countries, which is happening by Russia. Between 1,000 and 1,200 people may have been inside the city. The city deputy mayor has told the BBC. That's a lot of people. So I don't think we're going to get 1,000 to 1,200 people out of there. But I mean, the least amount of casualties, the better. We don't want one casualty, really, but unfortunately, that seems to be the case right now because Russia don't seem to be bothered about killing civilians, even though they wanted to unite the countries, right? As many as 53 civilians have reportedly been killed by Russian forces in the northern city of Chernihiv. I apologize if I get that wrong. Since Wednesday, according to its regional governor. Again, I've said this many times. Everyone's pointing the finger at Putin. Putin's the bad person. He needs to be locked away. He needs to be taken out of, the hierarchy and all that good stuff. But there are also Russian soldiers that are killing civilians and know that they're killing civilians. So they need to be held accountable because this is an absolute disgrace. An absolute disgrace. Russian journalist, this is the one that did the protest in the television, says she hopes her televised protest holding a sign saying no, I will lead to people to question local media reports. Again, I think the whole world is starting to kind of wake up to the media. It doesn't really matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. The trust in media, in news outlets, has dropped dramatically. And I think it started mostly in the US, where you have these very polarizing different news sources that post headlines just to kind of, arouse their fan base. So you've got like the most extreme common one on the right is the Fox News, and the most extreme common one on the left side is CNN. And they both seem to kind of arouse their supporters, which is making the country even more divided than it needs to be. And I think because of that, people are starting to be like, what's going on here? Like, what's going on? And they're starting to see the cracks. We're starting, especially because of the internet, we're starting to see the cracks in media, and we're starting to see what's actually going on. And I hate to be that person that we're waking up, because I feel like that whole kind of thing is a bit weird. But you get what I'm saying, right? People are starting to be like, what's going on here? Like, are we really being manipulated by people? And I think that the journalist here is making a good point. I think news outlets, the more honest they are, and I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, the more honest you are, the more respect you're gonna get, right? So, but the problem is now, obviously, is that if one side says something and there's an honest side that says something completely different, there's going to be people that don't believe it and say that it's fake news, unfortunately. But what needs to happen is we need this accountable, honest journaling. And they've tried that with all these different fact checkers and stuff, which I think help a little bit. But it is also up to the individuals who work at these outlets, these news outlets, to give honest reports and say what's actually happening on the ground and actually inform the general public. I think this is really important and is definitely going to stop radicalizing people, in my opinion. Okay, that's the summary. Let's go over some of these live updates real quick. U.S. House paves way for higher Russia tariffs. Okay, cool. I think what they're doing right now is already helping a lot. Ex-refugee donates maize crop to Ukraine. Interesting. I don't know what that's about. As a former refugee myself, I thought of offering some help. I am a peasant farmer. I don't have much to give, but I have a loving heart. Look at the pictures. I saw women and children dying, and I have a voice to contribute, bringing solutions to conflict. But I can donate some of what I have cultivated as a token of love. Amazing. Amazing. Look at this person. He has next to nothing, and yet he's still donating. What a beautiful person. Standing ovation as refugee speaks of war agony. So we're starting to see the people actually talk out now. The people who've escaped the country, they're starting to talk about it now, which is very interesting. Competing humanitarian resolutions at UN Security Council briefing. Let's have a read of this. Humanitarian briefings are always sobering, but an important reminder of the magnitude of suffering in Ukraine. According to UN officials, there have been 1,900 civilian casualties over the last 3 weeks of this war, with 726 people killed, 52 of them children. The WHO, World Health Organization, has verified 43 attacks on healthcare facilities as fighting escalates. This is literally heartbreaking to read. This latest meeting comes as Western nations and Russia have proposed competing humanitarian resolutions. Moscow's draft, among the other things, calls for the protection of women and children and condemns indiscriminate shelling in Ukraine, which they're contradicting big time. The move has denounced during the council meeting by Western leaders, including the UK ambassador to the UN, Dame Barbara Woodward, who called it cynical game playing by Russia. Yep, the aggressor in the face of human suffering. She points to their actions in Mariupol targeting a theatre where more than 1,000 civilians were sheltered, despite the word children written on the ground in Russian. Unbelievable. So they wrote children on the ground, and yet they still bombed it. And this is what I'm saying about the soldiers being held accountable as well. The US representative, Linda Thomas Greenfield, said Russia would be held accountable for its atrocities, telling President Putin, stop the killings. Western nations have used these briefings from top UN officials to authoritatively refute Russia's disinformation. Once again, Moscow's ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, I apologize if I get that wrong, repeated numerous unsupported claims during the meeting, including that Ukraine was using its citizens as human shields. The ambassador also accused the United States of pressuring nations not to support its draft, and announced Russia would no longer ask for a vote on its resolutions. Diplomats do not believe Moscow would have received the 9 votes necessary for passage. France and Mexico have proposed their own humanitarian drafts, which they plan to take right to the 193-member UN General Ambassador votes. So I want to know what these drafts are, these humanitarian drafts. I'm guessing it's housing, food, water, a route to safety, all this important stuff. But I really hope we get to see I want transparency. That's what I want. I want transparency during these meetings, during everything. That's what I want. I think it's better for everyone. I think that will also help the worry of disinformation. American citizen killed in Russian attack, US says. This was inevitable, unfortunately. There's obviously people going out there working, living, studying. So it's inevitable that people from different countries are unfortunately going to be caught up in the attack. It's horrible to see, but it is. We can confirm the death of US citizen in Ukraine March 17th. I hope their family are okay. Unbelievable. Who are Azov battalion defending Mariupol? Interesting. For weeks, the southern port city of Mariupol has resisted a Russian onslaught defended by a nationalist battalion of some 800 volunteers. So it's kind of like their own army, basically. To Russian, they are neo-Nazis, and their organizations lie in a neo-Nazi group called Patriots of Ukraine. Interesting. Ukraine has cracked down on neo-Nazis in recent years, and there's no nationalist parties in the parliament. That's very interesting. Very interesting. The battalion currently attracts a broad mix of nationalists, ultra-nationalists, and other young men united by a loathing for Russia. Half of them come from the east and many are Russian speaking. Very interesting. Shells rain down on Kharkiv as Ukraine's army stands firm. The latest developments in Ukraine. Okay. Oh my god, look at that. Heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. And there could have been over 1,000 people in there, including children. What an absolute joke. So, alright, let's move on. Pentagon says Russian advance is frozen. Let's go over to this map. And I want to kind of show you up here. It's been 3 days since I recorded that. 2 days? 3 days? It's been a couple days since I recorded that last video. And I want to talk about this advance. There's not really anything that's been moved with the red here. We've seen most of what we're seeing is this kind of advance. Excuse me. And I think most of that is because of this road. They want to take this road to stop supplies going up here, which makes sense. But we're not really seeing that much apart from the regular shelling, the murder of Russia, as usual. But we're not seeing as much of an advance as you would have thought. Down here's a different question. Down in the southern eastern part, there is a bunch of different spurts. Things are moving constantly. But for me, I'm keeping an eye here in Kiev, personally. Not that everywhere else is not as important, but I think this is kind of like the forefront of the battle. Nothing's changing. Or at least it hasn't in the past few days. And that's telling a lot. There's two things that could be happening from this. The first one is that Ukraine are holding their own, they're doing the good, and they're actually managing to hold them off, right? The second one is that Russia could be biding the time and getting supplies in. We talked about that massive long, what was it, 40 odd kilometer road full of vehicles trying to get into this area here so they can build a FOB, a forward operating base, right? I'm wondering whether that's still being built. They're starting to bide the time and be like, all right, what are we doing? We've got all that stuff now. And then there's one big advance. That's my worry, which I think could happen. Very, it's a very high statistic that could happen. They could be biding the time here, communicating between other places like here, up here, and being like, all right, we're going to do one big attack in one big go. Let's wait a couple of days till we're all ready. Push. And then they all push. Obviously, I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen at all. I hope Ukraine are defeating them and it is stalling them. But at the same time, we've got to be aware of this, and we've got to understand the tactics of war here, right? There's times of staleness, like the eye of the storm, the calm before things go crazy, right? This could be that, or it could be Ukraine really pushing and doing well. So I would say for anyone watching these videos, the next week is going to be very important. It's going to be very telling on the advance on Russia. In a week, we could go one way or another. Very easily, and it'll go like that. Whenever, like I said, if Russia are holding off and they're waiting, it's going to be like, boom, go, and a lot of it's going to be taken by Russia. Or it's going to be like, taking a bit, retreating a bit, taking a bit, retreating a bit, and it's going to be like that for a week, and it's going to be slow, and there's just going to be the regular stuff by Russia that's obviously disheartening. But the next week's going to be very telling. Very, very telling. And I'm not going to spend too much longer on this video now. I just want to make people aware of that. We're obviously getting the spurts down here as usual. But I think Putin's plan and the Russian plan is to take Kiev. I think once they take Kiev, things go downhill for Ukraine then, unfortunately. And it breaks my heart to say that. Let's just hope we get some more talks between Russia and Ukraine. We're seeing the odd bit of information come out here and there. This is being recorded at 7 p.m. Central Time in the US. So anything can happen between now and when this video comes out tomorrow. Or right now for when you are watching it. Things might have changed. We are getting little spurts here and there, like down here. But the next couple of days are going to be very interesting. Here's one of the spurts right here that I was telling you about. The next couple of days are going to be very interesting, all right? Or at least the next week. My plan is to give it a couple of days and not do another one of these videos for a couple of days, get some Halo out, try and, as privileged as we are, relax and have a little bit of fun. Build up some of the news, see what happens. I'm going to be studying these maps. I'm going to be checking it out, finding out what's going on, and then I'm going to give you one big update in one go in the next couple of days, or at least in the next 3 or 4 days. Okay, guys? But again, Russia are not doing anything, and this can be a good thing, or it can be a bad thing. We really need to keep an eye on it and be aware of their tactics, because Russia are not stupid. They might not have the best military in the world, but they're not stupid. They know what they're doing. And if they're holding off to do one big attack, that's certainly plausible in this situation where everyone's like, they're not doing anything. Ukraine's pushing them off. This could be a false flag, guys, okay? So just be very aware of that. And if you're in the area, again, please be safe. Make sure you have a plan B. Make sure you're aware of what might happen. Make sure you're looking at these maps and talking to your family and thinking about getting out as best you can. Obviously, be aware that Russia are attacking civilians trying to get out. So, again, just be careful, guys. And I love you all, and I hope you do get through this. I really do. Members, you're beautiful. You're amazing. I love you. I couldn't do this without you. Honestly, couldn't make videos every day if it wasn't for these beautiful people right here. So thank you for supporting the channel as much as you do. I truly appreciate it. It needs updating, this list. It's been like a week or two since I've updated it. So if your name's not on there, it'll be on there very soon. Links down below to all my usual stuff. If you want to get hold of me, give me some new information about this, Twitter and Instagram is the best way to do that, guys, okay? Other than that, I will see you in the next video. I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.